I'm going to keep this short and sweet because we have a lot of information to pack in this short time. Really honored to have these very well accomplished scholars and Dr. Jared Ball, Mark Bolden, and Todd Burroughs here. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Thank you to the College Activities Board, the Black Student Union, Multicultural Services. Let's get started and talk about Black Panther and Kilmonger. All right.
Thank you. And during the few moments that we have left, we want to have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me, us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Once you are enslaved and once you are in servitude, you have no moral obligation to the people who have enslaved you. In enslaving you, they have freed you of all moral obligation because the nature of their enslavement of you said that you are without humanity, without manhood, without womanhood, without dignity. And anything you do to get those things back is morally justified.
The struggle for survival in the United States is the handling of this never-ending tension between the institutional values of race, gender, and wealth, which give undue and unearned privileges and advantages to some, so that others cannot compete on an equal basis for the resources of this country.
Our people have resisted for 430 years in this wilderness, and they resisted for this generation to carry out what must be done. We cannot pay our ancestors.
All right, what's up, everybody? Good afternoon or good morning. Good morning. We thought what we would do this morning as a part of this presentation is sort of invite you all to an impromptu live performance of our past radio show. So that's why we started off the way we did, and we figured that's a good way to have an interactive conversation with ourselves and with all of you in the format, again, of our previous radio show titled I Mix What I Like. And we would invite you all to check out imixwhatilike.org, follow us at I Mix What I Like for all your relevant social media, and continue the dialogue really in perpetuity. I'm Jared Ball.
And what do you guys think about this Jared? He's right?
No, he's pretty sharp. Yeah, he did that no one else knows how to do.
Yeah, but he's a know-it-all. I mean, I don't think there's room.
Well, I love you. Big it up. He's a little way to everything. There's nothing to do. He's a great guy, but useless.
Yeah, he is a great guy.
And this is Dr. Todd Stephen Burroughs. And this is our third colleague, Dr. Mark Bolden, who is sitting in for our normal co-host, Dr. Hayden. So we welcome you all. Thank you all for joining us for, again, this impromptu radio-style conversation with the I Mix What I Like crew about the film Black Panther. So we figured we would start with Dr. Burroughs, who has a new book out, perfectly timed, about the film. Or rather about the comic book, the history of the comic book, and I will let you introduce that, and then we'll go into a conversation about the film, and then have a conversation with all of our guests.
Thank you. It's wonderful doing this live in front of an audience. We're so used to being sequestered in the small radio studio in Washington, D.C. As you said, my name is Todd Stephen Burroughs, and the book, which is available on Amazon, definitely on Kindle, is Marvel's Black Panther, a comic book biography from Stan Lee to Ta-Nehisi Coates. So we wanted to have a discussion right now, being that on Friday, Black Panther and his amazing friends is coming out, right? That some of you might know of as Avengers Infinity War. And we wanted to have a conversation about the history of the character. You may have known most of the movie, but as comic book geeks know him from 50 years of being in the comic. And the argument that I make is that the Black Panther that has now made more than $1 billion for Marvel and Walt Disney is the result of the black writers, Christopher Priest and Reginald Hudlin, their take on the character. They turned the character into this character that everybody likes today. So the book talks about how Marvel and Disney got to this point, where they decided that they actually could have a rival to DC's Batman and make that rival work.
So who created the character we now are seeing popularized at this grand scale? Let's start there. Who created the Black Panther?
Well, the character was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, who created, along with Steve Ditko, pretty much the entire Marvel universe. He was created as a result of them paying attention to what was happening with the African liberation movement, with them paying attention to what was happening with Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana.
So this is 1966.
1966.
And these are white men,
right,
Jews,
right,
who have a particular history that leads them to being into to comic books.
They were not strangers to a library. They were not strangers to newspapers. Absolutely. So they were paying attention. And so they looked at Patrice Lumumba, they looked at all of these African leaders and said, why can't we make a superhero in the comics reflect this? So the Black Panther premieres in Fantastic Four number 52, where he's the same character you see in the movies. He's very tough, very Machiavellian. He takes out the Fantastic Four in as many minutes. And it's a great story. But what happened was, after the Black Panther comic, after this comic, the Black Panther comes out, then in Oakland, California, the Black Panther Party emerges. And then I talk about how Marvel had to then start to backtrack on the character, making him less African, less powerful, because they were afraid of the association with the Panthers.
But we should be clear that the Marvel character predates the Black Panther Party, but postdates the Black Liberation Struggle's use of the Black Panther symbol emerging at a Lowndes County.
That's correct.
Right. So there was in existence before Kirby and Lee got involved, the symbolism, this notion of a Black Panther being a revolutionary symbol for Black liberation.
That's correct.
And then it got changed. And then there was a point where you talk about how there's a specific attempt to redefine and rename the character in response to this history.
As a result of the conflict between the Black Panthers, the East Coast, West Coast conflict between Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver, Marvel, which is located in New York, where a lot of this split and problems were taking place, Marvel got so skittish in an early 70s issue of the Fantastic Four, which interestingly enough dealt with the kind of South African apartheid storyline. They tried to rename him into the Black Leopard. Now that did not work. And so they changed the name back to the Black Panther. But you can see how skittish they were, because they had created this character. These are white liberal Jews. Stan Lee's a Cold War liberal. Like, he did not want to be identified with radical Third World revolutionary movements.
And the character in the comic makes this clear.
Right.
Marvel, the Black Panther character in a couple of scenes is seen saying,
right, and that
don't confuse me,
don't confuse me with
what's happening with the Panthers in the streets. So there has, it's sort of foreshadowing where some of this is going to go. There has always been a concern between the popular cultural presentation of the political world as it was playing out in real time. So this idea, when we start to end up talking specifically about the film, that there's no correlation between so-called entertainment and what's happening in the streets is something we want to, as Bob Brown has said, shotgun is an idea, or the South, right? So what else? So one of the points that we would invite people to, before the movie came out, the three of us and another one of our comrades sat down for a podcast at iMixWhatILike.org, where more of the details than what we're getting into now are covered. And then we would also invite you to check us out there for our first edition of Academics in Cars, where we break down this film in more detail than I think we may be able to get here today as well. But in one of those conversations, you also talked about how different forms of the Panther character emerge. And I think you've already sort of mentioned the role that the black writers who would eventually take over the character, the impact they had on the character. And then I wanted you to say, if you would, in combination at that point, how do we end up with the version that we see in the film? And what version of the Panther do we see in the film?
The version of the Panther you see in the film is the version created by Stanley and Jack Kirby that had been crushed basically by Marvel because of the politics and because of the way they approached the character for many years, but then got revived by the black writers when Christopher Priest and Reginald Hudlin took over the character. So what we see in the movies is basically the original character as reinterpreted by the black writers, because Black Panther's writers are also black. What was interesting from a Marvel point of view is that Marvel, when they were doing their master plan of films, of which, as we know, those of us who are hardcore, as we know, is about to end with this Avengers Infinity War storyline, they were looking for a character to put in Captain America's Civil War, and they realized, because of the black writers, because of the great work that the black writers had done in the comics, they said, well, we need to put Black Panther in Civil War, and that's how we have him 3 times in as many years in the movies.
Dr. Bolden, let me bring you into this real quick, because you have a particularly, not only African-centered clinician, clinical therapist approach, but as someone who is a practitioner of this clinical therapy with young people, and many of those who are grieved by the various oppressions in the society. What do you look to bring out from this film into the work that you do? How does the Black Panther film, or how are you interpreting this in your work, or what do you see come up with the people that you end up working with?
So first off, I think the film itself represented a place where all the clients that I work with, primarily African American, continental African, and Caribbean clients, we're going to see the film, and we're going to want to discuss the film in therapy. And so I looked for the therapeutic aspects of the film. One of them that I saw was the relationship between T'Challa and his father, T'Chaka. And as you know, T'Chaka's killed by Claw in Civil War, and then T'Challa comes back and is like, you know, in Panther trying to figure out what to do to avenge his father. The clients I work with, especially a lot of the black boys, are trying to figure out their relationships with their fathers, and their fathers are also trying to figure out relationships with their fathers. So one of the things that you see within the film that's going to discuss African leadership, royalty, and then manhood is the succession of power. So how is one generation preparing the next generation to carry on the family line of work, or correct the line where the mistakes have been made? So in the aspect of dealing with this Panther notion, you see T'Challa going into the ancestral abode to talk with his ancestors. And in a therapeutic room, I get to recreate those kinds of scenes, but where it would have been seen as something that was out of the norm, to say I want to talk to my ancestors in this room on a couch, now I've got a way to discuss this and think about it, that if you have righteously derived at a place of anger with your father or your father's fathers for what they did or didn't do, well, now we get to have that conversation as if the ancestors are in the room with us. So what we see there in the movie is T'Challa gets to go back and talk to T'Chaka, and then T'Chaka gets to go back and talk with his father, right? So there's a real deep relationship between saying I have direct responsibilities and access to my ancestors, and on a day-to-day basis I can interact with them. The clients I work with, these young boys whose fathers may have been killed in street violence, are asking those same questions. How do I get back in contact with my father to find out those things that I want to know? And those relationships change over time as the boys are starting to age. So what I did in Panther was say, we got a place now to recognize where the ancestors exist, and then you have a responsibility not just to blood, but to family, and then in a larger extent, I now have 8-year-old boys saying they recognize their space within Africa and recognizing their relationship to other African people based on watching Black Panther. So the movie did a lot of the heavy lifting that I'd like to do in therapy, and it gave a point from which we can emerge into an identity-based, politically based, culturally sound practice of mental health therapy that really is dealing with intergenerational trauma and wounds from political violence suffered in the day-to-day intercolonial context within greater Washington, D.C. area.
So when you talk about this there was something we didn't talk about yesterday that I definitely wanted to get to, and you brought it up in this as I heard in this in your discussion briefly about African community and relationships. I had a real problem with the film and its discussion of Pan-Africanism. I didn't like the way Pan-Africanism as a concept was deployed in the film. That is, the concept that all African people have a common history and culture and politics that should be organized around. It has a long tradition and history and variations and currents. But in this form, we got a very reactionary one. We have Pan-Africanism defined by a very un-Pan-African Wakandan ethic. That is, we're only here for us. We're not looking out for the rest of the African community. And this was something that Kilmonger's character looked to address specifically, which is why he's my hero in the film. Unquestioned, without caveat, exception, or anything. So I wanted to ask you both to comment on that. Like, what did you think about the Pan-Africanism in the film, and specifically what I see and we've talked about has been done to African Americans in this film? That I think there's a specific anti-Pan-African negative depiction of the African experience in this country, where the Black American character and the Black American experience is denigrated and made into the evil. But anyway, what did you all think about that?
I think it's all in your question. We have a film in which no African uses the word Africa. I don't know if you noticed that. But in the beginning, you hear the guy who gets killed, the uncle who gets killed, he mentions Africa. The white characters mention Africa. The only people who don't mention Africa are the Africans, or the Wakandans. They mention, if you notice, they mention Wakanda and the world. Wakanda and the world. And that's a setup, because why? Because at the end of the movie, as we know, they embrace the world, right in time, coincidentally, to be cannon fodder for Thanos on Friday. This is where we're at.
Explain that. What's going to happen on Friday? What's going to
happen on Friday is that Thanos is coming. Thanos, those of you who don't know Thanos, if you heard of Dark Side, think about the Marvel equivalent of Dark Side, right? Thanos is coming. The Avengers are going to be in big trouble. And they're going to need help. And you see in one of the trailers where they said, we need help. Well, where are they going to help? They're going to Wakanda for help. Okay, they're going to Shuri for help. You're going to see this. And so, in film criticism, there's something called the magic Negro. I don't know if you learned about this in your film classes, but there's something called the magic Negro. The magic Negro...
That would be like Morgan Freeman's every character.
Right.
That would be like Will Smith in Bagger Vance.
Right, right.
Say it again?
Stephen King's character in that movie.
The Green Mile.
The Green Mile.
The JC character, the Big Jesus character.
I just saw Larry and the City of a Thousand Planets, like Riri is like the Magic Negro in that, Rihanna, okay. The Magic Negro character is the black character in a white movie who only exists to help the white characters along. And then all of a sudden they get murdered, and this is what happened.
Dead and unforgiven.
Right. So we're going to have a situation, I haven't seen the movie yet, but just going by the trailers and just going by the general plot, I know we're going to have a situation now that for the first time, an entire African country is going to be the Magic Negro. Wakanda is going to save the world at whatever cost that happens.
Itself.
Right.
And then, so the challenge of Pan-Africanism is like multifaceted because there are multiple directions that you can look at Pan-Africanism. For one, you have several different African cultures explained within the movie as being part of a nation of Wakanda, right? So you've got mountain people, you've got river people, you've got folks who are traders, folks who are herders, probably folks who are hunters. All these different societies exist within the universe of Wakanda, which also has African languages, including Igbo and then Xhosa, right? So you see different African groups represented from the continent and kind of one place where African people have been safe from the vestiges of European, Arab, Asian encroachment on a country, right? So that idea of this super country has always been imagined for African people once the Atlantic slave trade takes place. Folks are wondering what would a nation that was built up and able to withstand the technological onslaughts of the Europeans, what would that look like if they were never a colonized history? So you have examples like Ethiopia that fought off colonizers in Italy, successfully won the Battle of Adwa in like 1894. You've got other cities that have existed that would be like Wakanda and Benin from like 800 until like 1400. Benin is one of these major cities within the Middle Kingdom Africa. You also have places like Mali. And if we're watching closely, somebody's going to make a movie about Mansa Musa as the king of West Africa, Kankan Musa, right? But these old lineages from Middle Kingdoms in Africa that we have no idea about all kind of get superimposed into Wakanda. So you got Pan-Africanists, African sovereigntists like Marcus Garvey, founded the UNIA, 1916s, who's imagining what a government of African people would look like that could compete with the major European colonial powers. The challenges here, as Dr. Burroughs mentioned, is the children of the colonial powers are imagining what that space would look like for the colonized people. And so Disney gives colonized people a version of what colonial powers look like outside the context of Africa, never having touched this one African place. So it's a really, really weird thing, right? And I almost, liken it to like the folks who were most traumatic to African people would then develop the trauma techniques to say, here's how you heal from what we did to you, right? So there's a therapeutic nature to the image, but it's limited is how far the images are allowed to become therapeutic. But we could feel going into the movie like this is going to be therapy for everything that I've seen that belittles and demeans African people, denigrates dark-skinned African women, equates beauty with light skin, light eyes, light hair, all of those kinds of things. And these things we see within skin color, African woman warriorship, African traditional healing, and what that would look like in an African context without the influence of outside power.
So, but then the film must be perfect, right? Because we get all of that, right? We get the beauty of dark-skinned African women. Mm-hmm. We get at least hints at anti-imperial ethics and African unity, and we see them even in the fight towards the end, unified, to a certain extent at least. So why are we, at least as I'm hearing this conversation, why are we just up here giving this film a 10 and praising it and thanking Coogler and Disney and walking away?
We know that Disney is out to colonize the world's imagination.
No.
And not Mickey. There was a group missing, right? I mean, in other words, for those of you who know Disney, and I'm assuming a couple of people in here know Disney, grown up with Disney, right? There's an entire channel devoted to young girls' empowerment called the Disney Channel. Their most popular show that they just canceled was about a black family who were part of the CIA, right? Casey Undercover. Because the star of that movie had to move up the Disney escalator up to Marvel, right? So we know that Disney is very clear on the fact that it's their image that has to be colonized. They take Aladdin, they take all of these images from folk culture, and they colonize them so you can't even picture any other idea of what a character would look like other than the Disney character. Now, what happened here was very simple. Disney, for a long time, had difficulty getting boys. They had a difficult time with that. So they made a couple of power moves so that they could have boys under their umbrella. The first thing they did was that they bought the Star Wars franchise, which was, controversial at the time, but nowhere as near as controversial as the $4 billion they paid for Marvel. And a lot of people on Wall Street thought Disney was crazy to do that. But Disney understood what the Israeli who saved Marvel Comics from bankruptcy, Avi Arad, understood. And what Avi Arad understood was that Spider-Man was worth, just by himself, was worth $1 billion. So Disney got Marvel, as we now see for a song, $4 billion. But those two purchases made sure that they had voids. Now, there was a huge market they were not getting to. And when they saw the success of putting Black Panther in Civil War, they decided to go after this market. And when they had a chance to take Spider-Man from Sony, at least editorially, and put him in the film, they had to move all of their film schedules around, so they coincidentally moved Black Panther to February. Coincidence. It's not like they study oppressed people and then they study how we're going to respond. So they did this accidentally. They accidentally moved Black Panther in February. Now, to show you how sophisticated the Disney apparatus is, Black Panther comes out and there's some murmuring among some in the African American intellectual activist class of, wait a minute, we're about to give Disney all of this money, we should then go and demand something from Disney, as if Disney's some sort of country that you could demand reparations from. Disney knew this was coming. How do I know that? I know that because 2 weeks after the movie comes out, Disney announces that they're putting STEM centers in major American cities for kids. So in other words, they knew there was going to be a request. They knew they had a character, Shuri, that they could represent as a new Disney princess. Because see, you know, the Lion King can only go so far, folks. You can only go so far with the Lion King. The Lion King was becoming insufficient to represent an entire part of the country.
So what are you saying? So the scene at the end of the movie, yes, the Bugatti spaceship land.
Yes.
What they call it, the brothers thought they were like, is that a Bugatti? And that was supposed to be a joke because we're making fun of ignorant Black American kids in the inner city hanging out on the street looking for a Bugatti spaceship and not having any other concept of a fancy aircraft and they call it a Bugatti. And then you are greeted with these super Africans, because they're not just African, but they're super Africans who offer not specifically the STEM program, but what was it? Arts Center. Right. We're going to buy these buildings. Arts and science. We're going to buy these buildings for you. And speaking of coincidence, this is exactly what the post-Black Power era Nixonian effort was to respond to Black liberation struggles, which was to say we'll redefine Black power as Black business and Black politicians, and then most specifically, we'll redefine political struggle as nonprofit.
And we give you Africa now without Pan-Africanism.
There you go. So that's interesting. That's interesting. Dr. Bolden, before we go too much farther, I wanted you to also make sure you said something, because I think there's a similarity here between the, in this sense, I guess, the cultural and political extraction of symbolism and Black radicalism re-projected and imposed in a very neoliberal, nonprofit form. But that same process occurs in real life, but also in this film, maybe in terms of the fashion and textile expropriation that's happening both in real time and perhaps in film. So, say if you would talk a little bit about your points about the fashion in the film and how that all relates to what's happening in real time.
Let me try to do this really quickly with just expanding how we think about things, right? So, does anyone wear leather? Leather coat, leather shoes? Where does the leather come from? It comes from animal hides, right? Okay, now, you know when they talk about Africa, folks will say there's a lot of animals in Africa, and there's a lot of exotic animals in Africa. And some of those leathers might be real expensive. Well, if you have all of those animals in Africa, then you have a leather textile industry. And if you have that, well then you might have some of the most exotic leathers coming out of the continent of Africa. So all those animals in Africa would then produce hides that people are wearing in their really expensive shoes, coats, bags, what have you, right? But the difference would be, it's not Italian leather. Because if it's Italian leather, well, then it's nice. Because there's more animals in Italy than there are in Africa. Does that make sense? And the animals that are in Italy, well, they produce better hides than the ones in Africa. See how that works? Now, imagine how the US makes its money. In its first iteration, growing cotton and having indigo plantations. The mercantile industries are what really creates the wealth for the super rich, both in this country, the colonizers who took it to the Caribbean, and then folks coming out of the UK, Britain specifically, right? And all of the people around the world are put to work for these textile-based industries. So now imagine if there are plantations in the US and you need a lot of sunlight and good land for both indigo, tropical climates, and then cotton, you also need those tropical climates. Do you imagine that there's anywhere that might have a tropical climate in Africa? Do you imagine that cotton could grow anywhere in Africa? So you would imagine there's an industry that could explode out of a textile approach to national wealth development. Except for the fact that the same lands that were owned in the US were owned by very few folks, and the same relationship exists to Africa. So where you might see a lot of African-looking textiles like this, for example, Ankara in the west, Kitenge in the east, these might actually be owned by non-African companies and sold to the folks in the continent to be like, these are your prints. And then shipped around the world to say these are African prints but produced in Holland by a company like Blisco or something, right? So the explosion that we see in terms of the fashion of the Black Panther, if it was actually a sovereign approach to it, you would see the folks creating national industries out of textile, leathers, indigo dyes, and then woven cloth itself, and then expanded on a larger basis so that folks are actually producing the clothes that they wear versus importing because you don't have the factories to produce the raw goods into a finished product in Africa. And the reason why you don't have that is when the colonizers left, they shut down the factories, destroyed the machines, and took the plants. So rather than saying, we're going to leave you the tools to build up your own economies, we're going to destroy everything that we built to create our economies to extract your wealth. And we don't get those kinds of things in the film.
Dr. Burroughs, why do we see this CIA agent at the end of the movie? Why is he in the movie, period? And then why do we see this, what I'm going to describe as a funky relationship between him and T'Challa at the end of the film?
Okay, this is going to be more comic book men than, black nationalists talking for a second. The Ross character comes from, ironically, the first Black writer, Christopher Priest. Christopher Priest takes over Black Panther in 1998. The year before, an entire Black comic line got shut down called Milestone Comics, where you get Static and Icon. Those of you know who Static is. This was a whole Black comic book line that went under a year before Priest got Black Panther. So Priest was skittish about how am I going to make Black Panther work when the entire Black comic book line didn't work. So he decided to give his Black Panther a white co-star and a white narrator, and that is the character in the movie, the Ross character, done by Martin Freeman. What he's supposed to be in the comic is almost like a comic foil, like a kind of a commentary on liberal racism, etc. And he's also supposed to make T'Challa more mysterious because since he's the narrator, we don't really know what T'Challa thinks, we only know what he acts. It's a comic book type thing. In the movie, he's made as a connection that pushes T'Challa to open up. Now, if you notice in the movie, they save his life and they bring him to Wakanda. Now, the rationale in terms of the movies, and the only reason that T'Challa did that is because Ross saved Nakia. Because remember, all he cares about is Nakia. He doesn't care about the Boko Haram women in the beginning of the movie. When Nakia saved, he cares nothing about them. He's there to get Nakia.
I'm glad you mentioned that, by the way.
He's there to get Nakia.
I'm just saying the anti-Islam, pro-Islamic terrorist mythology promoted at the beginning of the film with the whole Boko Haram kidnapping of girls in Nigeria scene at the beginning of the film. That was pretty slick. And as has come up with, I believe this was our other colleague, Dr. Haight, there was something similar done with the Marvel Iron Man film, with the beginning of that, being very pro-military, anti-Islamic, sort of following that traditional mythology of attacking these savages in caves with superior Western weaponry. So this theme, you know, but anyway,
I mean, some would view the Boko Haram scene as a liberation, the fantasy liberation of those women.
Right.
But definitely without that context, and in the context of what you're talking about, right. I definitely hear your critique there. But I mean, it's all about Nakia for T'Challa. Right. So he saves Ross and brings him to Wakanda to heal him only because he saved Nakia. So had he not saved Nakia, he'd have just died. So the Ross character, now, okay, it depends on how you view this, right? I view the Ross character as kind of like Lando Calrissian in Star Wars, right? Not given a lot to do, but what he's given to do looks important, right? So he's not, and you know, he's doing the air fight, right? He's doing the air fight. But even the way they set it up, like nobody in Star Wars goes, Lando, we're really counting on you, you know, Lando, we know you're an expert this, expert that. And Lando does work in Return of the Jedi that hardly anybody pays attention to because most people are focused on the Endor moon. See how deep I go? So, but in this case, you know, Ross is like the hero, right? Or one of the main heroes along with M'Baku, which in comic book we call Manny, we call M'Baku. Like they're like the other heroes of the film, which on a political version is disturbing. You know that the CIA is shooting down African planes to protect African sovereignty that's not Pan-African and not radical. So it's a very confusing political message.
To defend an African, really non-sovereignty that's imperial or colonially inspired, creating Wakanda by the film's end as a neo-colony in service of Western imperialism, which is why we have this slide up here, which is meant to both an image and symbol remind people what, at least what I'm arguing, was the film's intent here politically, as a statement against radical Pan-Africanism. So to your left, you see Patrice Lumumba, the only democratically elected leader of the Congo, giving a speech wearing that similar sash to the United Nations in 1960, but a speech very dissimilar from what we see from T'Challa's speech in the film, whereas Lumumba is saying, our newly independent Congo will use its resources and its sovereignty to defend itself and other African and oppressed colonized people. T'Challa is saying, we're going to use Wakanda's technology and resources to work with the West in defending against the uprisings around the world represented by the character Kilmonger, who again I argue is really the only, if not the most heroic figure in the film. Now look, we only have about 10 minutes left, and I wanted us to do, before we transition into the Q&A discussion, I wanted us to maybe segue with this provocative critique of the soundtrack. Do you want to foreshadow that? Or should we play it and then come back to it?
Let's come back.
Play it first and come back. Let's just come back in general. Okay, go ahead. Speak. Go ahead.
So let me finish this point, right, on the idea of just leather industry alone, right? So when you get those Italian leathers, they're actually coming out of Ethiopia. And then you slap an Italian name on the designer because what you're really paying for is not the leather, but the logo and the brand name, right? So then if we see anything start to bloom and blossom out of the African directives from the film, it would be within the actual fashion industry, where you have a burgeoning approach from African designers who are saying our work should be valued the same way everything else is valued, right? But that's almost like asking to be put on par with Europe as a standard, because the European standard is still better than the African standard in the global eyes. Now, should that be the same for African people? Should Africa look outside of itself to see what its standards should be? Or should it set the internal standards for what is supposed to be considered gold standard, right? So if we just did that with the actual minerals, as we're talking about Patrice Lumumba, Lumumba recognized, as other African national leaders did and do, that the mineral wealth in Africa would sustain it for centuries to come if it were nationalized per each country. So something like coltan has like $24 trillion worth. The Congo has $24 trillion worth of coltan in the Congo. So is the Congo a poor nation? $24 trillion of one mineral? Probably not so much. So then what makes the Congo an impoverished nation is the underdevelopment by multinational corporations that are coming in to extract mineral wealth. Well, we see that same thing in the way that Disney likes to move, right? Disney's first job in the 1950s related to the mineral industry connected to the military-industrial complex was to introduce uranium to the globe, to American citizens. And it did so using the story of the genie in the lamp, who gives unlimited power to whoever finds it. And what does that unlimited power look like? It looks like nuclear warfare, right? And then here's the propaganda aspect. What do the three different panels say? One, we wish for peace. Two, we wish for power. And then something about food and security, right? But the issue then is power. So the power is in stealing other people's story, because we know Disney wasn't related to anybody producing the genie's lamp to rub on. And then you know the propaganda comes in the saying, well, what do people plan to do with this nuclear power? Produce more security in the world? You feel more safe with Trump having the controls of a nuclear weapon? Like, do you? So then there would be some kind of discussion about ending nuclear power, right? But Disney's job, the same way they did vibranium, was to open up this nuclear mineral power source. The same way folks are going into Africa now and saying, all right, we can go get coltan, and that's going to power electric cars, phones, computers, tablets, and what have you.
And if I just could make the obvious symbolism here, is because Captain America has to be saved. In the film on Friday, you're going to see T'Challa give Captain America a new shield. I mean, the symbolism is right there.
All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to, as you all prepare, first of all, I'm doing what I should have done at the beginning. I want to thank you all again and thank our hosts. And what we're going to do is ask you all, as you prepare your questions, comments, critiques, queries, conundrums, catechisms, cacophony, calumny, we're going to play the theme song, or one of the theme songs from the soundtrack featuring the Pulitzer Prize winning Kendrick. What is it? What I said? You said it, but you got to echo. Oh, the Pulitzer Prize winning. Big. Kendrick Lamar, and then get into a Q&A. So again, thanks for tuning in and checking out this live edition of I Mix What I Like. And let's check out this Kendrick track as we get into a Q&A with all of them. That's not it.
Does anybody listen to Kendrick Lamar? You do? You think he was the best person for the soundtrack? No. I'm just asking.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you. Dr. Ball, thank you for that analysis on Kilmonger. Because when I watched the movie, he was my hero. However, Dr. Bolden, as a mental health practitioner, psychiatrist, psychologist, I ask you this question. Because I left feeling like he was a hero. But the narrative amongst black folks, and particularly young black men, was very conflicting, right? Wakanda, I'm like Kilmonger. You know, Wakanda's about keeping it, Kilmonger's about we all take it and do what we have to do. How does that impact black people, particularly black young men?
Great question. So if I were to look at this, on the right, one of my clients who's put on an African mask that we keep in the clinic. And when the children play, we have 2 dolls or action figures given to us by Dr. Burroughs from his old collection of action figures in the Marvel Universe. So we've actually created, through his gifts at Ascension Psychological Services, a black superhero universe, right? And one of the immediate things that we realized is we have all these black men superheroes. We didn't really have that many black women superheroes. So we recreated the man superhero, like, patriarch, right? So then we were like, okay, now what can we get from the other black women in the films and see black women superheroes? And Panther actually gives us some avenue to that, right? Specific to Kilmonger, Michael B. Jordan resonates more as a person who can be followed than does Chadwick Boseman. So the children recognized Michael B. Jordan and then grafted onto Kilmonger and said, I want to be more like Kilmonger. Why? He had more personal flair. His hairstyle was different. He had more anger. They recognized that. He was more disrespectful intentionally, right? So a lot of the boys that I work with actually identify with Kilmonger more than T'Challa. And then there's some stuff that Kilmonger does that just makes sense to the children. So I got one 8-year-old who was thinking, so I'm part of 2 billion people globally. Why wouldn't T'Challa want to be part of the whole global picture? This is at 8 years old. He's trying to figure these things out, right? So there's something about the way that Kilmonger moves that resonates inherently through Michael B. Jordan, through the style, and then through the brash, like aggressive, seeming stronger, seeming tougher than T'Challa in general. And then what he wants to do is go to war. So a lot of the black boys that I work with, they're always looking to see what power looks like. And they feel Kilmonger's desire for power as an outsider who's trying to make his way back in. And those themes, they come up all the time with the black boys that I work with. So thank you for that question.
Do we have any other questions? Audience?
Hi, I also want to thank you for your speeches. I really appreciated your information on a lot of those points. But my question for you would be, how do you think we as the black community can remove the control that the white media has over our narrative? Because it seems to me is that most of the films that are made by the white media that involves black people teaches black passivity and black activity only in the service of white people.
It's a very good question. I think the short, simple answer is unfortunately you can't. Without, media reflect the political will of those in political power. Without shifts in power, and I've always had this disagreement with many of my peers and colleagues in, for instance, media reform efforts and stuff, who argue that if we, for instance, democratize media, then we can actually have a democratic world. And the opposite, I think, is true. The media reflect the politics. So we would have to organize, have a social political movement, assume power, and then we would be able to assume control or a greater degree of influence over popular culture and media. In the meantime, we have to work aggressively to support and create alternatives, develop as much as we can alternative public spheres. I think we have to be hyper-critical of the mainstream and not look to participate in the mainstream, be validated by the mainstream, and to have it be our source of information for our public sphere. There has to be something else created or some things else created and then organized around, and that's unfortunately the only way I can think that I think is going to happen.
I almost completely agree with that. I think, though, if you get a chance to do something like the way Donald Glover did with Atlanta, which I think makes some extraordinary critiques for broadcast TV, then you can do that. But the question that I have is that you have to understand what you're getting in this game for. I think Glover understands what he got in the game for. So when he got into the position, he was able to make some very clear critiques of the society within the show Atlanta. So I don't know if you've seen it on FX, I strongly suggest you watch it if you haven't seen it. But if you're just in it, as you're saying, to participate, right, I agree with you. Like if we're going to develop our own sphere, we need to develop our own sphere.
But as much as I like Atlanta, as much as I like Atlanta or any other individual show or effort, that in and of itself isn't going to overturn the apparatus. It's going to be the exception to the rule. Right. It's going to be little pockets of, less severe abuse. Right. But there's not. But in terms of a media environment that's going to sustain, encourage, produce, and teach, and all of those good things, we have to create that on our own and probably in smaller pockets and be less willing to assume that the internet and social media are leveling the playing field, because they're actually not.
So as a historical example, I'm going to ask Dr. Burroughs to talk about Oscar Michaud, because here's a filmmaker who was able to make dozens of films. But what happens then is the medium itself surpasses what he's able to hold on to, right? And so even in spaces where you have a person associated with a group of people creating films under a black imperative, you still have the medium itself that's going to say, all right, but those films that you made now, you don't even have the machines to show them anymore or the means to preserve them.
I think you did a good job with the show. I'm going to move on to someone, I'm going to move on to a dichotomy I think you can understand. Ava DuVernay, Julie Dash. Julie Dash, African-centered, clear analysis, blackballed out of the industry. Teaching at Howard. Ava DuVernay, hooked up with Steven Spielberg, Oprah Winfrey, content not as strong, famous, rich.
Can I just add, one more thing we got to add about Ava DuVernay. You got to remember, she is not a filmmaker by background and training. She's a public relations expert. And
she went into PR. My nephew, the filmmaker, said she went into PR as her strategy to get to make films. So she had a strategy.
I rest my case.
Right.
And as someone who's hypercritical of that industry, PR, public relations, psychological warfare, propaganda, literally all have the same criteria, definitions, and application. Right. So they're euphemisms. Public relations is literally euphemism for propaganda, developed after the Second World War. So the purpose of public relations is to literally mess with people's interpretations of the world. And if it helps to do that by presenting yourself as being a part of that community, you will be heavily rewarded, which is why we see she has yet another movie, which just in the preview you see is disturbingly addressing multiraciality and still in the pursuit of a white male as the godlike missing figure. So it's just another film that erases black men. But anyway, that's another, we into that one.
Right. The interesting thing, but to talk about his idea of the structures, okay, now I've kind of dogged out even DuVernay a little bit, right? Okay. She was this close to doing Black Panther. I don't know if anybody knew that. She was this close to doing Black Panther. But she told Marvel what she wanted to do. And I think that Julie Dash part of her was trying to come out, and Marvel said, no, we're not interested in that. We're interested in building our universe You know, so they didn't want a strong portrayal of a strong Africa in Black Panther. So now, ironically, Ava DuVernay has to now do one of the whitest properties of DC Comics, Jack Kirby's Fourth World. So see, she missed out on the opportunity to be a superstar in the superhero universe, so she quickly signed up to the first thing that was like available. And somewhere, and what's really sad when you talk about Julie Dash's story, and I know she resists being portrayed as this tragic figure, is that Daughters of the Dust was only 1/5 of a movie she had in mind. Daughters of the Dust, she was going to tell the whole story of African people from the future to the past, all of that. Daughters of the Dust was the most commercially viable thing she had in her head. And that's what she wanted to go and make. But imagine if she was able to make her whole thing. We would have gotten something very different, and maybe an Ava DuVernay would have been inspired to go on a more path that she might really want to go on instead, or made move, right? Or made move. So it gives you an idea how complex white supremacy works within the production of images. But if you think about it, how do you maintain a system without having complete control over the production of image? So we can't be surprised that there is huge resistance toward anything we try to do that actually has a pure intent.
I don't see any pressing question. I just want to add, since I see a bit of diversity in the room, that, as we mentioned yesterday, folks may want to pay attention to the shifting tokenism in American pop culture, as black people are slowly being replaced as tokens in white media by various other so-called minorities. This is all meant to perform the same function of welcoming these groups into the Western cultural store, so to speak, without addressing the material conditions that they still suffer in great deals of inequality. So, if people want to, before, Dr. Bolden mentioned yesterday Moana and Coco and all these attempts to bring in different groups, they should also look back at the particular history of black people in this country vis-a-vis race and popular culture to see what may be coming down the line for them, because it is not welcome, we're all holding hands and we're all going to be equal and sharing our resources type of thing. It's meant to hide the fact that we're not. I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, good question. So I've heard a lot of different things from you guys today, a lot of positive and negative things about the film, like the CIA being involved with helping Western colonialist powers, and also the impact of the film on young boys and the way it changes the narrative and how people view themselves in the world. And I was wondering if you think that the film is more problematic than it is beneficial, or do you think it's balanced, or do you think it's unclear, and also perhaps the impact you think that the film will have going forward in the Black liberation struggle?
My whole thing is, I think that, first of all, it is a very good question. My conclusion is almost always the same, that given the political context that all this is happening, whatever might be good is more than mitigated by the bad. And the more we are convinced that images and films and media are entertainment and are somehow positive, I think the more we miss out on the negative impact of these films, which is really, as we alluded to a little bit here, to redefine black radical symbolism, the Panther being this important symbol historically, redefining what it means to be a Pan-African, redefining all of that into something that's very safe for commercial white supremacist capitalism to survive. So I tend to think it's all negative. I don't want to see films about my heroes. I don't want to see films claiming to represent anything politically or culturally of interest to me, because in this context I think it's all going to be distorted and ultimately negative, and I'd rather not have to deconstruct that before we got to the positive of whatever it is. But that's just my opinion.
And I'm glad that there are people like you who believe that and have an analysis for that, because I think we need to be hypercritical of these things. So for instance, I'm of the quote-unquote opposite view. I love the movie, right? I love everything about the movie but its politics. The problem is the movie though is with its politics, right? So what I say in my book is that this is the beginning, hopefully, of the next Julie Dash figure who wants to do all of one of the 2 million independent African superheroes and black superheroes. that are constantly being shown at every independent black comic book convention, both locally and nationally, somebody's going to take one of these characters from this independent realm and do an independent movie, and it will be a hit. And it will be a hit because of Black Panther. So I think Black Panther's real value is the fact that we now know that this is possible. We now know that with a certain amount of money and a certain amount of skill and a certain amount of commitment, we can create things that can counteract this or do this the right way. And I think that's the best thing in terms of political analysis and the socio-cultural analysis. I think that's the best we can hope for, doing that this is a Marvel Comics product, which means it's a Disney product.
So I think the film is energy, and one of the things we try to do is direct the energy and attention to the energy in the way that we see fit. So that narrative piece is really where I look to see how good is it, how useful is it, how much has to be thrown away, right? Would the material conditions of people have changed if they didn't see Black Panther? Did the material conditions of people change because they saw Black Panther? What really changed was the feeling in the moment of seeing Black Panther. But if you just kind of recall back to walking out of the theater and seeing people's responses, I didn't get the sense that this was going to be a movie that would be a launching point for the next iteration of liberatory struggles of anybody. I saw people walk out and throw up some Wakanda signs, and that was pretty much it. So I looked at it, and somebody asked the question early on, like, why is it that this movie's gotten so much hype? And part of it is obviously the propaganda to get to the film, but the second piece is there's no political responsibility coming out of the film. You have to make that up, right? So if it was one of these films where you had some political responsibility, people would have created a list of demands of themselves and others coming out of the film. Okay, now after having seen this, what I want is 54 Wakandas on the African continent. Anybody say they want that? Anybody say they want an end to domestic violence between men and women the way that we saw it play out at the end of the film between Okoye and her Get Out dude? Right? That wasn't really a demand. Some folks were like, I want an outfit to go see the movie, and then that's it. Halloween, we're gonna see this whole Black Panther theme come back up, and a lot of little kids are gonna wanna be Black Panther. And then the grown-ups are gonna be playing Black Panther. But that's that's Halloween, right? So what about the day after? What are people going to do in that situation? So there's not really a culminating moment of the film where you're like, all right, now what do I do? If you take directives from the film, well then you engage in the UN process and you make sure that the CIA is never killed or just dies on its own. So your job is then to protect the CIA and anybody who talks about reparations, repatriation, and retribution should be killed and left to die. That's a heck of a statement coming out of the film. Now, is that what's on the minds of the young folks that I work with who've come out of watching the film? They're like, no, I saw the Black Panther and the Gold Black Panther. So then my job as a therapist is to make sense of this within the family, community context, and the school context, right? So what does it mean that you have to do to build Wakanda in your school? It means you can't fight with everybody in your school, right? Okay. We need to make the space safe for the girls to be scientists. Cool. That's fine. But is that what the film said? Not really. So for me, the film is a page that everybody was getting on, and I was like, all right, let's see what's on that one page, and then introduce you to every page thereafter. But it's impossible to do because we don't have the Disney Marvel machine behind our thinking, right? So Marvel has already said, we're going to make every mythological story of every superhero that you could imagine. And how do we know this? Because Malcolm X and Martin Luther King have already been in the Black Panther series. Dr. Burroughs can talk about that. But they've already said everybody you consider to be a hero will put in and then make them service the aims of who? Not Black Panther, because he won't lead the Avengers. He would lead like he wouldn't lead the Revengers. Let me just put it that way. If Kilmonger had a team, it would be like I'm building a Revenger team, right? And T'Challa's job was to stop the revenge. Like, no. We are isolated, non-aligned country. We don't pick sides, except when the UN comes calling to save us from space invaders. Now, I don't know about anybody in the continent who's worried about aliens.